The sun burned red over the alien desert. Wind blew dust across the cracked ground. Traders shouted, calling buyers from every corner. Old ships rested near the market. Their engines silent, the crowd gathered. Not for food or tools, but for slaves. And at the center of it all stood a man with sharp teeth and cruel eyes. He held a chain, thick and rusted, at the end of that chain. Was her, the alien girl stumbled forward. Her legs weak, her skin was pale blue, but bruises turned it purple and black. Her white hair was dirty, tangled like roots. She wore barely enough clothes to cover her. Old scars covered her back and arms, some fresh. Some ancient, the ex-husband yanked the chain. Pulling her to her knees, "She's strong," he shouted. "She can clean, fight, or lie still." Laughter came from the crowd. But not from her. She didn't cry. Not anymore. She only looked at the ground. Her body shaking under the heat. Her lips moved, whispering something only she could hear. A name, maybe, or a prayer. The trader lifted her chin with his boot and showed her to the crowd like a broken thing. "This one used to be married to a noble," he said, spitting, "but now she's just a burden to me. Make an offer." The first bid was low, too low, even for a servant. "Look at her," someone said. "She's ruined." "No fire left in her?" Another laughed. "I'd buy her just to throw her to the dogs." The ex-husband didn't care. He wanted to be free of her, to drink and gamble with whatever coins she brought. He smiled like he was selling garbage, not a person. But in the shadows of the crowd stood a quiet man, a human, dressed in worn desert gear. His boots were cracked, his coat patched, and a bag rested on his back. He wasn't rich, not a trader or a soldier. Just a traveler passing through. He didn't speak, didn't laugh. Didn't even move at first, but his eyes were fixed on her. When she lifted her head for a brief second, their eyes met. She saw something strange, something warm, not pity, not desire, just a kind of stillness. Like he didn't see a slave, but a person. It scared her. More than the chains, she looked away, thinking it was a mistake. The bid stopped. No one wanted to go higher. "She's useless," one shouted. "Let the sand take her." The ex-husband frowned. His plan was failing. He raised her arm high, exposing the deep bruises around her wrist. "One last offer," he shouted, "or I'll throw her in the back and sell her by the piece." That's when the human raised his hand. No loud voice, no drama, just a small wave. The crowd turned, surprised. "Did you say something, stranger?" The trader asked, squinting. The human stepped forward, his boots crushing the dust beneath him. "I'll take her," he said calmly. For the last price, laughter broke again. Why would a human want that mess? Someone mocked. "She's broken," another said. Not even worth a day's food, but the human didn't answer. He simply placed a few credits in the trader's hand, took the chain gently, and walked away with her. She didn't understand. She waited for pain, for cruelty, for orders, but the man said nothing. Just walked slowly, letting her follow, not pulling her, not yelling. He stopped beside a small transport ship, old but working, opened the hatch, and looked at her. "Do you need help getting in?" he asked, voice soft like a breeze. She stared at him, confused, then nodded slowly. Her legs too weak to lift, he bent down, lifted her without pain, and placed her gently inside. For the first time in years, her body didn't shake from fear, only from confusion. Inside the ship, it was warm. He gave her a blanket, not chains, a bottle of water, not punishment, and he didn't lock the door. She looked at the chain in his hand, but he didn't tie it to anything. He just placed it on the ground and walked to the pilot's seat. "Sleep if you can," he said, not even looking back. "We're going far from here." She stared at him for a long time, still waiting for the lie, the pain, the trap. But none came, only silence. And the sound of the engines rising. As the desert faded behind them, she closed her eyes, and for the first time in forever, she dreamed of peace. The ship flew through the black sky. Stars passed outside the window, glowing like cold fire inside the ship. The lights were soft, the air warm. The human didn't speak much. He only checked on her once, quietly leaving a bowl of warm broth near her bed. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. But her hand still shook as she reached for it. She looked around before she took a bite, expecting someone to hit her. But no one came, just silence, and the gentle hum of the ship moving forward. She didn't even know his name. He hadn't asked hers either. It was strange. Stranger than the bruises on her arms or the pain still stuck in her ribs. The silence was peaceful and terrifying because she didn't trust it yet. Peace was always a lie, a trick. Before the next punishment arrived, later that night, she opened her eyes and saw him sitting at the controls. He had removed his coat, revealing an old scar along his neck. He looked tired but calm, like someone who had lived through hard days, but never gave up. He wasn't watching her. He just flew the ship, quiet, focused, distant. She curled tighter under the blanket. It was soft, too soft. It made her feel like she didn't belong. She stared at the chain lying on the floor. He hadn't touched it since. Why didn't he chain her again? Did he forget? Was it a trap? The next day, he spoke again. "There's a medkit in the storage," he said, without turning. "If you want to clean your wounds." His voice was low, steady, not commanding, not soft, just normal. She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. He didn't wait for an answer, just set the ship on autopilot and walked away. She waited 10 minutes before getting up. Her feet were weak, but she followed his path. The storage room was small, but full of supplies, bandages, food packets, extra boots. A cracked mirror hung on the wall. She looked at her reflection and froze. Her face looked like a stranger's. One eye still swollen, lip cracked, skin dark with dirt and bruises. She remembered how her ex-husband used to force her to look at herself, to remind her she was worthless. But now, in this quiet ship, no one forced her. She touched her face gently, then reached for the bandages. That night, she came out of the room without chains. She stood near the control chair, looking nervous. He didn't move. Just glanced at her once. "You feel better?" he asked, eyes on the stars ahead. She nodded slowly. He gave a small nod in return, then turned back to the view. That was it. No questions, no orders. No cruel smile. She sat in the corner quietly, not far from him. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It felt like space, room to breathe. She watched him pilot the ship through a belt of glowing rocks, his hands steady, his eyes calm, and slowly, something inside her began to wonder, who was he? Later, she found the courage to whisper, "Why did you buy me?" His head turned slightly, but he didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because no one else should have." His voice had no anger, no hero's pride, just truth, because no one should be treated like that, he added. She didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened, and she looked away. She had forgotten how it felt when someone didn't want to own her. But to save her, that night, she had a nightmare. She cried out in her sleep, twisting in her blanket. Her voice choked with terror. "No, please. I'll be good. I'll be quiet." She woke up shaking, cold sweat on her skin. But when she opened her eyes, he was there. Kneeling beside her, he didn't touch her, just spoke softly. "You're safe here," he said. "No one will hurt you again." She looked at his face in the dim light. There was no anger, no hunger, no lies, just calm, tired concern. He didn't ask what the dream was, didn't try to hold her. He just left her water and walked back to the controls. The next morning, she stood beside the window. Watching the stars, she whispered his name softly. Testing it in her mouth. James. That's what he had called himself during a call she overheard. She repeated it, then smiled weakly. She still didn't trust the future. But something inside her had changed. Her body still hurt, but her heart was lighter. She wasn't property anymore. She wasn't cargo. She was a guest, maybe even more. And this ship, flying to nowhere, felt like the safest place in the galaxy. The ship touched down on a quiet moon. Its surface was silver and cold, dust rising like smoke as the landing gear locked in. The sky above was dark, with a soft purple glow from the nearby gas giant. James powered down the engines, stood up slowly, and looked back. She was already waiting near the door, wrapped in the same blanket he gave her, but something had changed. She wasn't hiding behind walls anymore. She stood straight, her hands steady. She still looked fragile, but her eyes had a fire now. "You don't have to come out," James said softly. "I just need supplies. Maybe a few ship parts." "I want to come," she whispered. "I don't want to stay alone." He nodded. No questions, no pressure, just trust. He handed her a light jacket and a small breathing patch for the thinner air outside. And then, for the first time, they walked side by side. The town was small, made of old metal huts and flickering lights. Alien workers moved around quietly, carrying crates or checking scanners. But when she walked past them, the stares began. Some people turned, shocked. Others whispered. A few laughed cruelly when they noticed the bruises still healing on her face. She tried to look away, her shoulders tightening. But James stopped walking. He turned and looked at the group. One of them, a tall alien with sharp fangs, smirked. "She yours? Human?" James's voice didn't rise. "She's free," he said. "So be careful what you say." The alien laughed again, but didn't reply. Something in James's eyes, calm but unshaking, made even the loudest voices fade. She looked up at him, confused. No one had ever defended her like that. Not without expecting something in return. He just kept walking, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. They reached the market zone, while James looked through parts. She sat near a metal bench, watching the crowd. Her fingers touched the back of her neck. The brand was still there. A burned mark from her ex-husband, a symbol of ownership. A thing stamped on her like she was less than an animal. No amount of washing could erase it. No amount of kindness could hide it forever. A child alien passed by and stared at her. He pointed at her neck and asked his mother, "Is she one of them?" The mother pulled the child away quickly, but the words were already in her heart like a knife. One of them, the scar beneath her skin, still told the world who she used to be. And no one could see past it. James returned with a bag of parts and supplies. But when he saw her face, he paused. "Want to go back to the ship?" he asked. She nodded. Eyes down, he didn't push, didn't question. They walked back through the cold dust, her steps slower now. Her chest tight with shame, inside the ship. She sat down without a word. James placed the bag down and knelt beside her. He held out a small container of healing gel and said, "This can help with the scars. The physical ones, at least." She looked at him, eyes wide. You saw it?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I didn't need to. It doesn't define you." Her voice trembled. "You don't understand, James. That brand means I was sold, like a thing. Again and again. It's on me forever." He didn't flinch. He just looked at her and said, "You were hurt. But that doesn't mean you're less. It means you survived, and you're still here." Tears welled in her eyes. But she wiped them away quickly. "I hate crying," she muttered. "I used to be punished for it." James leaned back, gave her space. "Then you're allowed to cry here. Or not cry, or scream, or sleep. Whatever you need." She stared at him, unsure what to say. No one had ever given her choice. No one had ever seen the scar, and still looked at her like she mattered. "Why are you like this?" she asked softly. James gave a tired smile. "Because I've seen enough cruelty in the galaxy," he said, "and if one person can be different, maybe that's enough." She looked down at her hands. They were rough, marked, but still hers, still alive. Maybe still worth something. She took the healing gel, and for the first time, she applied it not out of fear, but because someone gave it freely. Without price, that night, she stood near the ship window again. The gas giant's glow painted her skin with gentle light. She touched her neck, feeling the burn still there. But for once, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like the past, and she wasn't living there anymore. She whispered James's name again, not because she was scared, but because it made her feel safe. Maybe tomorrow she'd tell him her name too. Dark clouds rolled over the icy planet. Wind howled like a hungry beast. The ship shook as it passed through thick layers of cold air. Warning lights blinked red, one after another. James gripped the controls tightly. His jaw locked. "We have to land," he said. Glancing back at her, "We're not flying through that storm," she nodded, holding the wall for balance outside the windows. Snow and dust flew in spinning swirls. Lightning cracked across the sky, purple and blue. It looked like the sky itself was breaking apart. James pushed the ship toward a rocky valley, a long crack in the ground that offered some cover from the wind. The ship hit the ground hard, skidding across frozen rock before it stopped with a thud. Silence, then the lights flickered off. James stood up, grabbed a pack, and walked to her side. "I have a signal flare. Food. Heat blankets," he said quickly. "But this ship won't protect us if that storm comes down harder." She blinked, her breath turning to mist. "Where will we go?" He looked out the hatch window and pointed. "There's a cave just ahead. I saw it on the scanner. It might be tight, but it'll be warmer than here." He didn't wait for her to agree. He opened the door, and cold slammed into them like a wall. She gasped, wrapping the blanket tight around her shoulders. Snow blew sideways, stabbing her cheeks. She could barely see. But James reached back, grabbed her hand, and led the way forward. Every step was hard. The wind pulled at her legs. Her feet slipped, but James never let go. Even when they fell, even when ice cut their hands, he kept her close. She couldn't speak, her lips numb. But inside her chest, a strange warmth grew. Not from the storm, from him. After what felt like forever, they reached the cave. It was dark, shallow, but protected. James lit a small heat lamp, and they huddled beside it. Their breaths echoed off the rock walls. Snow sealed the cave's mouth like a curtain. The outside world disappeared. She curled up near the lamp. Shivering, her fingers were blue, and her teeth chattered. James removed his coat and wrapped it around her, then took out the emergency blanket and placed it over them both. She didn't understand. "You'll freeze," she whispered. "I'll be fine," he replied. "You need it more." He sat beside her, back against the wall, silent. But his body heat slowly warmed the small space. She watched him from the corner of her eye. He had scratches on his face, ice in his hair. But he never complained, never sighed, never blamed her for this mess. He just stayed there solid, quiet, present. The silence in the cave felt different than the silence in her past. It wasn't empty, it was full of a feeling she didn't have a name for. Safety maybe, or something deeper. She pulled the blanket tighter around them both, then whispered, "Why do you keep doing this?" James looked at her, surprised. "Doing what?" "Protecting me," she said, her voice almost too soft to hear. "You barely know me." James looked away for a second, then said, "Because you deserve it." Those 3 words hit harder than any storm. She swallowed hard, tears rising behind her eyes. No one had ever said that to her, not once, not her ex-husband, not her family, not the men who bought her. They had called her things: property, trouble, shame. But never someone who deserved anything. James didn't wait for her to respond. He simply closed his eyes and leaned back again. Hours passed. The storm outside screamed. But inside the cave, a calm began to grow. She leaned closer to him, just slightly. Her shoulder brushed against his. He didn't move, didn't flinch. She closed her eyes and whispered, "My name is Sarai." It was the first time she had spoken it in years. The first time she chose to speak it, and she gave it to him. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. James opened his eyes and looked at her gently. "Sarai," he repeated, like the name was something valuable. "Nice to finally meet you for a long moment." They said nothing else, just sat there, sharing warmth, listening to the storm die slowly outside. Sarai didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time, she didn't fear it. She wasn't property anymore. She wasn't a broken thing in chains. She was Sarai, and she wasn't alone. The sun rose slowly over the icy valley. Snow glowed soft gold as the storm faded into quiet. Inside the cave, Sarai stirred beneath the heat blanket. James was already up, standing at the edge of the opening. He looked out in silence, as if listening to something deeper than the wind. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. Her body still ached from the cold, but her heart, it felt lighter somehow. Last night, she had spoken her name against Sari. Not a slave, not a thing. A woman, and he had said it like it mattered. "We should head back to the ship," James said softly. She nodded and stood slowly, wrapping the coat around herself. They walked together through the snowy path. It was still cold, but without the storm's teeth. As they reached the ridge above the landing site, Sarai stopped. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. There was another ship beside theirs. Sleek, black, with red stripes along the wings. She knew that ship. She had escaped it once barely. Her hand trembled as she whispered, "He found us." James followed her gaze. Eyes narrowing, two figures stood near their ship. One tall and broad, and the other lean, cruel, smirking. It was him, the ex-husband. The one who chained her, sold her, tortured her. Now he was back, and he wasn't alone. James placed a hand on her shoulder. "You stay here," he said, calm but sharp. "No," Sarai whispered, her voice shaking. "I won't hide again." James looked at her, and for a moment, their eyes locked. A question passed between them. Then he nodded once. "All right, but stay behind me." They walked down together. Slow but steady, her heart pounded in her chest. The snow crunched beneath their boots. When the ex-husband saw them, his smile widened like a snake. "Well, well," he said, stepping forward. "I thought I lost my property." James didn't blink. "She's not your property," he said. "She's free." The other man laughed. "Not by law," he sneered. "She was mine, contract sealed. Traded fair, you broke agreement." Sarai stepped out from behind James. Her voice cut through the cold air. "There was no agreement," she said. "You beat me, starved me, sold me like a sack of grain. You called me wife, but treated me like dirt. I'm not going back." The ex-husband's eyes narrowed. His companion, a bounty enforcer, stepped forward. "I have legal claim," the enforcer said. Raising a device, James stepped between them. "No, you don't," he replied, "because she's not a slave anymore, and I have her witness account. Medical records and footage from her brand wounds." He held up a data chip. "And if you touch her again, I'll make sure the Alliance sees all of it." The ex-husband snarled. "You're bluffing." James stared him down. "Calm and still. Try me for a moment." The cold wind held its breath. The bounty hunter hesitated, then said, It's not worth a full investigation. He stepped back. But the ex-husband didn't move. He looked at Sarai, rage twisting his face. You think this human loves you? He hissed. He'll toss you out when he's bored. You're broken goods. Sarai's hands trembled. But she stepped forward. She didn't hide, didn't flinch. No, she said softly. I was broken. But I healed because someone saw me as a person, not a tool, not a trophy. He didn't buy me to own me. He saved me so I could choose, and I choose me. The ex-husband stared at her. Shocked, this wasn't the woman he left in chains. This was someone stronger, someone free. Sarai turned her back on him, walked past the bounty hunter, past the snow, and back toward the ship. James followed her silently. Neither of them looked back. The black ship rose into the sky and vanished. But the moment lingered back inside their own ship. Sarai sat down quietly, her hands still shaking. Her breath shallow. James knelt beside her. You did that? He whispered. Not me. You faced him. She nodded slowly. Tears touched the corner of her eyes. But this time, they weren't tears of fear. They were the tears of someone who survived. And who finally spoke for herself? You're not broken, James said. Don't ever let anyone say you are. She looked at him, really looked at him, and whispered, Stay with me. His hand reached out, covering hers. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. Not as long as you want me here. The station floated in orbit above a golden planet. Its metal surface glowed under twin suns inside. Guards in dark armor stood beside heavy doors. Sarai walked through them slowly, her hands clenched. James walked beside her, calm but alert. They had come to face the law, the same law that once allowed her to be sold, branded, beaten. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she came to fight. The court chamber was cold and wide. Aliens of many species sat in the viewing gallery. Whispering at the center stood the judge, a tall being with silver eyes and skin like stone. This is a hearing, the judge announced. To determine if the claim of ownership is lawful or void, the ex-husband was already there. Dressed in a fine robe, he smiled like a man ready to win. His voice was smooth as he spoke. She was given to me by contract, he said. She agreed. She wore the collar, the brand. Served in my house, she was mine. Sarai stood still. But her heart raced. James touched her back gently. She stepped forward when the judge called her name. Her voice trembled at first. I was forced, she said. I was beaten, locked away, starved, chained, and passed between traitors. He didn't own me, he destroyed me. The judge looked down at her with unreadable eyes. Do you have proof? James stepped forward, placing the data chip on the table. Medical scans, he said, showing broken bones, old scars, burn marks, surveillance from ports where she was traded. Ship logs, and her personal account. The ex-husband laughed. She's lying to make this human look noble, he said. She's manipulating him. She can't be trusted. She's a former slave. Sarai's fists clenched. She looked up at the judge and said, I was a slave. But not anymore, and you will hear my voice. The room quieted. She removed her jacket and turned around. Her back showed the brand still dark. Still raised, gasps spread through the room. The mark was deep, burned by fire, not standard, not legal. It was the brand of the underground trade, legal and brutal. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. This was not made with consent, James said. This was made with cruelty. The ex-husband tried to speak again. She's using emotion, he said. Not law, but the judge raised a hand. Enough, the judge stood. Tall and silent. I see the mark, he said. I see the evidence. I hear her voice. Ownership through suffering is no ownership at all. This case is closed. She is free. Sarai didn't move. Her breath was trapped in her throat. She had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was real, she couldn't believe it. The chains in her mind snapped one by one. The ex-husband shouted something, but the guards moved in. He was taken away, still yelling her name like he owned it. But she didn't flinch, because now she knew he didn't own anything. The gallery remained silent. Then one alien elder whispered, "She speaks with fire." James turned to her and smiled. "You did it?" he said softly. She looked at him with wide eyes. "You believed in me," she whispered, "when I couldn't even believe in myself." He gave a small nod. "You were always more than what he made you. You just needed someone to remind you." That night, back in their ship, she sat alone near the stars. Her hand brushed the place where the brand was. It still hurt, but the pain felt different now. It wasn't shame anymore. It was memory. Proof of what she survived and who she had become. James walked over with 2 cups of hot tea. He handed her one and sat beside her quietly. They didn't speak at first, just stared at the stars, and after a while, she leaned against him, slowly, gently, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because she chose to. "I've been afraid of tomorrow for so long," she said, "but now, I want to see it." James looked at her, his voice low. "Then we'll face it together." And for the first time in her life, Sarai felt like the future was hers. Weeks passed quietly. The stars no longer looked cold to Sarai. The ship hummed through space like a heartbeat, steady and calm. She cleaned, helped with repairs, even cooked sometimes. James never asked her to. She just wanted to do it. Not to pay him back, but because his ship felt like a home now. One evening, she stood by the mirror, brushing her long white hair. The bruises were gone. The cuts had healed. But the scar on her back, the old brand, still remained. She stared at it for a moment, then turned away. It didn't own her anymore. It didn't define her. It was just skin now. And she had reclaimed it. James entered with a soft knock. Holding something in his hand, "Sarai," he said. "I got you something." He walked closer and placed a box on the table. She opened it carefully. Inside was a small pendant, silver and round. The center glowed faint blue, like starlight. She touched it slowly. "What is it?" she asked. "It's a memory stone," James said. "You can put your name in it. Not the one they gave you, not the one they branded, but the name you want for yourself." Her breath caught in her chest. No one had ever asked her that. She had always been Sarib. Even that name was twisted by others, tied to chains and cruelty. But now, she could make it hers again. She held the pendant tight. "I'll keep it close," she whispered. Every day they sat together in the cockpit later. The stars outside drifted slowly like fireflies. The silence between them was soft and not awkward, not empty, just warm. She glanced at him. "You're quiet tonight," she said. He smiled gently. "Just thinking." "About what?" He looked at her, eyes steady and deep. "About how far you've come." Her chest tightened. "I wouldn't be here without you." James shook his head. "You did the hardest part," he said. "You chose to live." She looked down. Her hand brushed against his, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers through his, slowly, shyly, but with choice. He didn't move, didn't rush, just looked at her and waited. "You make me feel like I'm not broken," she whispered. James leaned closer, his voice low and warm. "You were never broken. You were just trapped in a place that never saw your worth." "But I see it." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. "I don't know what this feeling is," she said, "but when you're near, I don't feel scared anymore. I feel strong." James's voice cracked softly. "That's love, Sarai," he said. "That's what it feels like, to be seen, to be safe, to be chosen, not owned." Her heart skipped. Love. a word she once feared. A word used by the man who hurt her the most. But now? It sounded beautiful, real, true. She leaned into his shoulder. And for the first time in her life, she let someone hold her, not in control, not in chains, but in trust, in peace, in love. They didn't need to say more. The stars outside whispered enough. Time passed, and the wounds inside her began to close. Not forgotten, but no longer in control. One day, while walking through a small market on a peaceful moon, she saw a girl in chains, being led by a traitor. Sarai froze, the past rushing up like a wave. But she didn't shake this time. She stepped forward, placed her hand on the traitor's shoulder. "Let her go," she said. The traitor looked confused. But then James appeared beside her, calm but firm, within moments. The local authorities stepped in. The girl was freed. Sarai knelt beside her and whispered, "You're not alone." Later, James smiled at her as they walked back to the ship. "You saved her," he said. Sarai looked at him. "No," she whispered. "We saved me first, inside the ship." She stood in front of the mirror one last time. She took the memory stone and pressed it to her chest. Her name glowed inside it. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a promise of who she had become. She turned to James, took his hand. And for the first time, she said it proudly. "My name is Sarai, and I choose you."